In 2020, at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, the first lockdown in the UK began the weekend that LDC Festival 2020 was scheduled. When this was announced, the LDC team had 1 week to prepare to host the 2020 LDC Festival online, making us one of the first festivals in the UK to take place online. We decided that the LDC Festival 2021 should also be online, and what follows are the recorded events that took place live online during the day. We hosted 2 slots during the day where people could meet and chat. These parts of the day have not been included here.
All right, welcome everyone. So I'm going to begin my welcome talk because what I want to do in this half hour that I've got is to just talk you through a little bit through LD Comics and also a little bit about today. Mainly the reason I wanted to introduce LD Comics, again, many of you are very familiar with us and it's lovely to see your names joining the festival. What's been interesting for me is 2 of our shortlisted entries are new to comics, and it made me think perhaps some people here today are also new to LD Comics and the history and how we began. So I'm going to briefly talk through that, how and why we started, because sometimes we can forget the origin and what we're doing, and it sort of informs where we're going next. So in 2008, personally, I'd worked for a decade as a freelance illustrator, and I started a postgraduate degree that initially was about producing a graphic novel. And I was looking at the personal story of an experience of the death of my child that had happened earlier. And at this time, so this is over a decade ago now, the graphic novel was a less familiar term in the UK. People weren't quite in the general public. So amongst the comics community, it was known. And Paul Gravett was orchestrating some really interesting talks and events in London, which I attended. And it was there that I met Sarah Lightman, who was working as a fine artist and also studying at postgraduate level alongside her practice, and was interested in, she was working on her autobiographical diary comic ongoing. And so we found that we had quite a lot of now. What we need to do is ask you to
SelfMadeHero graphic.
That's great. Keep yourself muted if possible. That was nice music though, very jolly. So we had a lot in common. We were interested in autobiographical, we had an interest in fine art, and also a feminist methodology in our academic approach. So we were reading similar literature, we were intellectually compatible, and also we're getting on as friends. And we met over coffee discussing the masculine nature of spaces for discussing comics at the time, and the concept of what we launched as Ladies Do Comics emerged from that. So the idea we came was just really, wouldn't it be fun to have an event in a welcoming space, perhaps not a pub, because pubs historically are masculine spaces, and still I feel personally today they can feel intimidating if you come along on your own as a woman, not for everyone and less so, but still historically. And I was quite keen to have our events, our meetups, not in an institutional space, because again, we were very much starting from a grassroots, from, we didn't have funding, it was voluntary, and it wasn't a job, it was something we wanted to do for ourselves. We wanted something that was fun, that was slightly playful, enjoyable, but also incorporated this critical element of art school crit that we both experienced, and that we both noticed how sometimes that reduces students to tears, but we wanted to do it in a more supportive, holistic way. And our remit was autobiographical work, celebrating the minutiae of the everyday, the drama of the domestic. So basically we were wanting to do something that benefited us. And we found the space we found originally was the rag factory where we started, and that had been identified because the Zine Symposium was hosted there in 2009, and the rag factory was a space that offered cheap space for actors to rehearse. And Ed Baldry had hosted this event there, and it seemed just right. So we rented a space there once a month. And at the time, there was no heating in the building. There were leaks through the ceilings of water and dodgy wiring. So Sarah and I brought our projector, our kettles, Sarah baked cakes, and we invited guests to participate and present, and for a public audience that was free of charge. And again, that was an important part of what we were doing. So we started in July 2009, and by Christmas, we were attracting a regular audience of around 75 people or so. And at the time, this is what's important, there was very little comparable activity of this scale, certainly not in London. So we continued, and we started spurring branches around the UK and globally. So here's Lou Crosby and Emma Burleigh. Lou Crosby set up Leeds branch and later joined our core LDC committee, is still on it. Let's see who else. And Emma was our first prize winner, which is conducting a lovely panel conversation later today. And she joined our core committee in 2019 when Sarah Lightman stepped down. Rachael Ball, London-based, and Wallis Eats, also members of our core committee, ran the London branch of LDComics when Sarah and I were finishing our PhDs, and stayed on to join the committee. And Charlotte Bailey, who I'll come to later, who's also speaking today as our guest, set up the Birmingham branch and later joined our core committee, stepping down in 2020. And Paula Knight set up our Bristol branch, and Emma Burleigh carried that on. So there are a few branches around the UK that persisted until lockdowns closed everything down, and also abroad. However, so the prize, what's behind the prize? Really, the prize was something that Sarah Lightman, it was her wish, and it certainly continued as her legacy since she stepped down. I was always resistant at the beginning because it required funding. So it took what we were doing to a different level, really. So from 2018 to 2020, we received two significant Arts Council funding amounts, and this enabled us to host a physical festival for 2 years, and we hosted it at the Free Word Centre, and I expect some of you here will have been. It was the first year was 1 day, the second year was 2 days around our prize giving, and it was really a joyous and fun occasion, certainly from us. The Arts Council funding was about supporting the activity around the festival, which we've developed since before and during that time and since, to offer professional development type activity throughout the year and around. So the activity we've included, the critical review sessions during our festival, a mentoring program that's continued since then and is now online around the year, a residency, and we took that residency idea online in the last year, and it was really successful. I mean, I say that because we enjoyed it, and that's really means we'll do it again. And some workshops we've developed and delivered physically and then online. A really important part of our festival and what we're doing is the LDC Lounge, Ladies Lounge, now LDC Lounge, organised by Lou. And what it is, those of you who submitted entries to our competition or have done in the past, we asked for all the entries to be submitted as PDFs online for the judging, but then to be produced as physical zines. And the reason why is that we then displayed them in our festival just like this, and it allowed people the opportunity to pick them up and read through them. And not only that, but it also meant that it was a very low budget, mobile form of display of what we're doing and what you're doing. So what we've now gathered a few quite small suitcases, I say Lou has carefully catalogued everything so that we can then take them around the country and indeed abroad, so that we have a table and that we can display them for the public and including people in the industry. So what we're doing in that is everyone who enters the prize, who submits work, becomes a winner because we're platforming your work. So this is the democracy around what we're doing with the prize. And the exciting news is, well, COVID allowing, on the 18th, Rachael Ball and myself will be hosting a table at the Illustrators Fair in King's Cross, London, with the Central St Martin's building there. So that's scheduled to be a physical event. We'll bring this year's suitcase and spread them out and chat to people and invite people to look at your work if your work was part of that. And this is images from the first residency we hosted in Lincolnshire, and we've just met up our core committee and talked about hopefully running further very small residencies where the focus is on having a nice time, being together, and again, this generating this critical feedback on your work. So this is Charlotte Bailey, who'll be speaking as one of our guests later. So this is another important legacy that happened in 2019-20, is initiated by Charlotte, was to change our name and become LD Comics. And I'm just going to share the rationale that convinced me, because DC Comics, of which you see we've got DC Comics in our name now, she said, which of you, to our committee, who knows what DC Comics stands for? And the point she's making is that in branding, it doesn't matter if it's letters that no one quite knows what they stand for, because we're established enough so we can do that, and it's slightly more grown up and avoid some of the conversations that were emerging around the name as it was. Okay. So the pandemic and what next? So of course, 2 years ago, we were scheduled to have our 2020 festival at the Free Word Centre, and the week before we were due in March to have our festival, COVID-19 enforced, the lockdown was announced. So we, again, thanks really to Charlotte Bailey, who took us through we were early adopters or early adapters, do we say, of online. And so Charlotte's pushed us into action, and we delivered with this week's notice. We translated our festival that year onto an online, and it was really fun and terrifying, and but introduced us to the technology that has become part of what we do now, and also what we're going to be doing in the future. And we're not alone, and all of you here have joined us, so thank you for that. So you know, welcome to our Zoom palace. We have so much space, we have so many rooms in this palace of ours online. And what's been really interesting for our organization is that when we were running our monthly events in London, we struggled to keep a venue because we didn't have money to pay every month to rent a venue. We were quite emphatic that we wanted our monthly events to be free, or just £1 or £2 towards refreshments. And also the venues we did find were often limited in space to maybe 40 or 50 people. And this way it's been really amazing to be able to have up to 100 people coming along every month. And not only that, but be able to have global guests and global audience, as well as people around the country. So, you know, people who used to join our events, who would like to, who were out of London, it saves the implication of cost of having to travel and find somewhere to stay. So that's all good. I forgot to say actually earlier, but, or maybe it came up on my screen, but LDC is women-led, but not women only. So, you know, that's an important part. So again, one of the things in our, my vision for the future is what I think this last 2 years has made me personally think is we're constantly in this race to be bigger and to do something different and, you know, spread ourselves, and all this kind of capitalist based pressure. And actually, I think what LD Comics, and I think our core team is keen to do, is actually do what we do well, which is small, quite intimate groups, and support each other in ways that are valuable to all of us and enjoyable. So rather than feel the pressure of what's, you know, growing, I don't think that's necessarily beneficial. We're told that, you know, to get more audiences is better, but actually in our case, I think it's nicer. We get to know each other more if we keep going at what we're good at. But in terms of I think this is the part where I'm announcing. As I said, we had our kind of core group discussion last week, a lovely meetup, and talked about how we're going to change the prize from now on to biannual. So, and the reason is it will give you, if you're entering, more lead-in time. So I think the date we had, and I'm sure Lou will drop it in the chat, but it was the deadline for submission for 2 years will be January 2023. So this gives you a lovely long year to prepare for your next entry. And we hope you will. However, having said that, it doesn't mean we're doing nothing next year. So we will be doing something, but our aim is to have a year of activity that moves towards shaping what the next, the 2 years from now, prize will be. So please stay with us and watch as we unfold and announce our thoughts and plans as we go through the year, which will probably start with events and activities in the spring, summer. But of course, we'll continue our monthly online. So I think whether we start introducing physical activities, face-to-face activities, we'll continue our online monthly and really enjoying that part of it. I want to now talk about some thank yous. So again, as always, thank you to the Arts Council, although now we're not receiving funding now, but without that seed funding for those couple of years, we wouldn't be on the course we're on now. So that jolted us to expand in what we are doing. And now we're happy with what we're doing, and we're going to run it without that. So Rosalind B. Penfold has been a significant supporter of Ladies to Comics, now LD Comics, since inception in 2008, very early on. So for those of you who don't know Rosalind B. Penfold, a Canadian artist, and the graphic novel she produced was Dragon Slippers. It's a pen name. Sorry, I forgot to put Penfold with a capital P there. I got in touch with her as soon as we started running LD Comics in 2008, and since then have become good friends, and she has brilliantly supported the Rosalind B. Penfold Award since 2018. And this award is for artists who submit entries who are over 50. And the reason is because Dragon Slippers was published when Rosalind B. Penfold was 59. So what we're doing as part of that is encouraging women that you're never too old, really, to start telling your stories. Some thank yous. Oh, sorry, there's an A has slipped into Rachel Bromfield's name. Apologies. Rachel Bromfield shouldn't have an A. Rachael's been brilliant supporting our social media activity and promotion and publicity the past year, as has Lily Derain, who joined us and made on our website this fantastic page of everyone who's ever spoken at LD Comics now has a presence on our website, and that was part of her MA course at Sussex University. So thank you to Lily. Addie Gregory, who's volunteered with us over the summer and is created a Patreon project that hopefully will launch next year. Sally Plowman, who's who's been editing our videos for when we upload them. So thank you to Sally. And a big thank you to our esteemed guests for our day ahead. Again, you know, we're not receiving funding now, so we're back to that more grassrootsy approach of we're doing it because we want to, and a lot of our guests are also coming from that starting point, which has shaped our festival today. And you know, again, we've got old friends and new amongst us, and really grateful for Andy Oliver, who's been an ally and friend. It's funny, we've been going for so long that when you start to meet people every year or so for a hello, how are you? And then before you know it, you realize, oh, actually we're friends because we've known each other for 15 years or whatever it is. So looking forward to Andy Oliver, who will kick off the festival. Joe Stone, for me, quite a new friend, but all the people who are with us today are absolute bursts of energy and commitment and goodwill. So again, Joe's an amazing creator in his own right, and will be joining us today. And that's another important thing. All of us on our committee are creators. And again, that's something that sometimes we forget, that you know, we become the people behind something, the organizers. And I think a lot of our guests will relate to that. So whether, you know, Andy Oliver is a writer and a reviewer, a very great one. And sometimes we get, oh, aren't you the person who organizes? And so we kind of, it's important to keep remembering that we're all human, actually. Nora, who I'm not sure, Nora Goldberg was worked closely with Joe Stone on the festival, and I'm not sure, maybe joining us too today. Amy Galloway and Rachael Davis, creating Comics UK, an amazing initiative that's been set up this year. Woodrow Phoenix, again, a great cartoonist, artist, person, friend. And we'll be talking with Charlotte Bailey, who's coming back as an artist and has been part of SelfMadeHero's initiative. SelfMadeHero is a publisher, so thank you to them. Jenny Donaldson will be with us, who runs Gnash Comics. So I think Comics Bookshop. So sometimes as part of this chain of what we do, sometimes we overlook the importance of bookshops. And again, Jenny will talk about, you know, the energy and the ideas behind what she does. Niki Bañados, sorry, Niki, that I couldn't remember where the little N is on top of the N on my machine. Niki Bañados, Rima, Sabina, Aouf will be joining us as former winners of our prize to talk with Emma Bailey. And thank you also to our judges this year, Carrie Fransman, Amy Galloway, Cheryl Martin, and Anusha Nanyayakara. Thank you. All right, so what's my next slide? Thank yous also to us, our committee team, thanking ourselves, and a massive thank you to you for being here, and for everyone, particularly who has submitted to the prize, who has joined at our monthlies, who's presented their works. It's, you know, without you, we don't get the stimulation and the feedback and the kind of support ourselves. So it's about the community is you're as much part of it. All right, about today. So you've got the schedule, and we've got it all, you know, carefully timed, and we're about to go on that. And I just want to talk a little bit about, we've got got 2 time to meet up breaks at 1 to 3 and then another 4:30 till 6. And really, these are times for us to switch off our cameras and go and have a break or lunch or whatever. However, during that time, we decided that one or two of us from our committee will be here in the Palace hosting those moments. So please do feel free to join us and chat, but there's nothing scheduled particularly, but it's an opportunity for us to have those little coffee chats that would happen in our physical events and that we never quite have time for in our monthlies. So again, old friends and new, let's join together then.
But just to quickly introduce Andy, he is editor-in-chief of Broken Frontier, a web magazine which publishes news, interviews and essays about the comic book industry. I expect a lot of you have come across it already. Has a particular focus on the British small press scene, self-published and alternative comics. And today he's going to tell us particularly about something called Drink and Draw. So thank you so much, Andy, for being with us today. We're really looking forward to this. Over to you.
Okay, so what I'm going to talk about this morning is the Gnash Comics and Broken Frontier Drink and Draw. I've got a little bit of a presentation here to begin with, and at the end, if there is time, we might try and do something practical as well, but let's see how we are for time at the end. Okay, so the Gnash Comics and Broken Frontier Drink and Draw, which some of you may have attended in person over the last 6.5 years, or you may have attended online since we went on to doing it on Twitter after the pandemic began. It's an event that has become a very sort of community-based social event over the last few years. It began way back in 2015 when I was approached by Tom Oldham, who's the events manager at London's Gnash Comics Shop, about the possibility of Broken Frontier collaborating with Gnash on what was going to be a new monthly event. And the idea was that the Drink and Draw would create a relaxed and sort of informal atmosphere once a month for attendees in the company of a sort of rotating group of guest creators from all areas of the comics publishing world, and one that was free as well, because we wanted to ensure that it was a very accessible event in that sense. So unlike other drink and draws that you might see advertised in London, ours is completely free. So the idea was that I would promote the event on Broken Frontier every month with reviews or interviews about the guest artists and their work, and I would host the evening in the pub. Gnash would similarly promote it through their channels, and on the nights they'd have a sort of introduction before we went to the pub that we held it in, where you could meet the creators and you could buy copies of their work at a discounted price. So I kind of really jumped at this as an opportunity, because from the very beginning I could see how it could work, not just as a sort of collaboration between ourselves and Gnash, but also as a springboard really for championing the work of emerging voices in comics and getting them more of a public spotlight through inviting them along to be guest artists at the event. So we debuted on June the 25th in 2015. That's our very first evening there, some pictures of that in the John Snow pub in Soho. Our guest artist that night was Tom Humberston. And for the first year, we had an artist in residence who was Danny Noble, whose work I'm sure many of you are very familiar with. So that very first night was a little bit haphazard. We didn't really know what we were doing in terms of a format, and we couldn't actually book a space in the pub. So we had a number of people who got there early, trying to spread out over as many tables as we could. So to begin with, it was a bit sort of informal, but by chance on that first night, I hit on the idea of having themed drawing rounds where everybody would draw to a given subject. And at the end, we would show the arts to everybody, as long as they were willing, of course. And it worked so well that it's become the format that we've used ever since, whether we've been doing it in person or online on Twitter. So over the years, we've moved through a number of different pubs in Soho. In fact, we've been through most of Soho, I think, at one point or another, before we found a permanent home in an upstairs room in the King's Arms, which is just off Oxford Street. And we've had, in that time, we've had something like 200 guest creators coming in as artists. So it's been a sort of blend of different creators. We've had emerging talents coming along, like Shangamola, Eden Joby, Peony Gent, Shazleen Khan. We've had established graphic novelists, people like Carrie Fransman, Isabel Greenberg, and Gareth Brooks. And we've also had creators who have worked for some of the high-profile US publishers, people like David Hine, Emma Rios, and Katie Skelly. So you can see in the slide there, that's some of the creators that we sort of pre-evening launch bit at Gosh. And on the left, you can see us in the pub. Again, there's you can probably make out, if you know them, Joe Deasy there, and our former comics laureate, Hannah Berry, on the night when they were guest artists at the Drink and Draw. And what's been nice as well is around festivals and bigger events, we've been able to theme evenings and get in guests from a more sort of international background. So particularly around Thought Bubble, we've had a number of US and Canadian creators have joined us if they've been in London before going up to Thought Bubble. We've had a number of successful collaborations with our friends over at the French Institute. And we put on some special nights with them, with leading French creators joining us, including a very memorable night with Baudin, who you can see there in that in those slides, in those pictures on the slide there, who was an amazingly lively presence. He's well into his 70s and he was standing drawing all night and sort of really working the room. So again, it's really nice to be able to introduce creators from not just the UK, but from across the world as well, when we can actually target things around events that are going on elsewhere. Okay, so after the first year, Tom at Gosh stepped back from being the Gosh presence at the Drink and Draw, and my friend Nora Goldberg became my co-host. So any of you who have attended a Drink and Draw during the many years Nora was working on it will know what an integral part of its success she's been in that time. And I really think probably more than anybody, Nora's the person you have to thank for what the Drink and Draw became, because her passion and commitment to it, without it, it would never have become the event it is now. She was really crucial to that. So I really want to acknowledge that this morning as well. And after Nora left Gosh in the last year of doing things in person, I was joined by Claire Wood and then briefly Will Humberstone at Gosh as co-hosts as well. So it became such a successful event over the last few years, but in terms of, I guess, health and safety, we have probably breached every rule going in terms of overcrowding in most of Soho's pubs now. As you can see there, a couple of the different pubs that we have used over the years. And on the left-hand side, you can see that's a rather memorable night when we were in a very small space in the pub. And I think nearly 80 people turned up, and we even had people sort of sitting on the floor rather than not joining in. So it can get very, very packed. We're in a small room now above the King's Arms, where we've been for the last about 3 years, I think, or we were before the pandemic. And again, it gets very, very busy in there. There's sort of people standing, drawing at the walls, and sitting at the bar up there, as well as at the tables. So it's become a hugely popular event in London. And yeah, it's a shame we just don't have a bigger space, but I think rather that than nobody turning up, obviously. So yeah, in a lot of ways, I guess we've become sort of indebted to the team at the King's Arms for being so welcoming with what we're trying to do with the drink and draw. And what's become so important about it is I think it's become far more than a social event. Creative projects and collaborations have been formed because of it. Artists' work has reached new audiences because of it. So many kind of friendships have come from it, and it's become this sort of wonderful, supportive comics community in itself, which is a lovely thing. I think it's gone beyond what we initially aimed for as just a sort of monthly meetup, and become a sort of organic community in itself. That's a picture there of one of the drawing theme entries, just to give you an idea of the kind of things people draw. So the theme for that particular round that evening was giraffes on bikes, which was probably a trickier one than often set. But the idea is that the guest creators will choose the drawing theme rounds, and then they'll judge at the end a winner. And we let people sort of draw for half an hour at a time, and then we pass the drawings round and everybody has a look at them. So that was by Joe Deasy as well, just to give you correct credit. So so we were really successful with it in person, and then the pandemic hit, and like everything, we had to think again, and we really didn't want to lose it. So we had to think of a way in which we could keep the drink and draw going and keep it going online. So I spoke with Gosh, both of us, both Gosh and Broken Frontier, really wanted to ensure that we still had this regular meetup in some formats. So I came up with the idea of doing very much a similar thing that we did in the pub, but doing it over Twitter instead. We already had a hashtag, GoshBFDD, that we'd been using to promote the event on social media. So we decided we'd go the same way with free guest artists, if we could, each month, and they would choose a theme again, send us a quick illustrated doodle this time, rather than us just announcing the theme, which we would post on we would post on Twitter, and that would give the participants a sort of visual nudge that we could use as a prompt on social media. So it became so popular on Twitter that we decided we'd start doing it every 2 weeks. And I think at the beginning of the pandemic, that kind of sense of disconnection and dislocation meant that there was really a demand for doing it, particularly in lockdown, for doing it that often. So what we do now is every 2 weeks on a Thursday night, between 7:30 and 9:30, we post the free drawing themes. So we do one at 7:30, one at 8:15, and one at 9 o'clock on Twitter. We give everybody 30 minutes to draw something fitting that theme. And after that, we spend 15 minutes picking a winner before the next round begins. So the advantage of this, I guess, is that we've been able to expand our audience beyond the London scene, and we've got a whole new community now that's built up around it. People that are attending every 2 weeks who wouldn't have been able to come when we were in person because they're across the UK, and also internationally as well. We've had international participants from Europe and North America joining in. So that's been a nice thing in that it's expanded our reach. And again, those artists that we're pushing and promoting each time, it's expanded their audience as well. And what we try and do, again, I put up an announcement every couple of weeks on Broken Frontier with some links to the creators. And hopefully as well, because they're all tagged in on the night, they'll get a few new followers as well. So again, more ways that people can discover each other's work. We invite the participants to introduce themselves at the beginning as well, and most of them will be comics creators, or a lot of them will be comics creators in some form or another. So again, they get to meet each other as well. So it's a fun thing, and everybody checks out the drawings through the hashtag at the end of each round. So again, that art is circulating, and it's reaching far wider audiences on Twitter. Even if people aren't joining in, they're seeing all the art being posted, and I'm retweeting it from the Broken Frontier account. So hopefully, again, more people finding the artists involved. And the other thing that's been nice about this is we've been able to add more international creators into the guest artist mix too. So that's been a pretty cool thing. So I'm not saying it, I'm very reticent to say anything good coming out of the pandemic, but we have found something good out of repositioning what we're doing. Yeah, it's going to be interesting what we do with that when and if we are back to in-person events in the future. Speaking of that, we have done a few in-person things recently. I've not been able to host things because I've been stuck indoors for most of the last couple of years until the last month, but we have, thankfully, Nora has returned to host a few events for us, and we had a return in a sort of controlled environment. So there was a drink and draw for the Hackney Comic and Zine Fair that Nora hosted. She also did one at the French Institute recently with some of the French creators that were going up to the lakes for the Lakes Festival. And we had a very special sort of thought bubble night as well, which opened events at the festival weekend on the Friday night in Harrogate. So Nora put together, as you can see there, an exhibition of art that had come out of the drink and draw, which was on show all weekend. And on the Friday night, hosted another drink and draw there. So that's 3 in-person events that we have managed to run recently, concurrent with the online events. Okay, so yeah, the future, I guess, is, where we go from here is I guess a watch and wait kind of thing. But I think at the moment, in-person events are going to remain special one-offs for the foreseeable future. But we're still going to be running the drink and draw online. And I think because it's been so popular online, and we've built up a sort of second community of participants, I really want to keep that going as well in some form as we move forward. So if we are in a position to do things in person again in the future, in the near future, I'd also want to keep the online one going as well, because we've built up a whole wider community there, and I don't want to lose that, and I don't want them to lose what we're doing with it. So I'd want to support that and keep that going. So that's that's my final picture there, which is just a few of the 6 to watch creators with me at the King's Arms. It's one of my favourite pictures ever, I think, from my comics environment. So and last mention really just to Gosh for being kind of so forward thinking with this, in terms of, they're not just a shop, they're a community hub as well, with all the events that they've done over the years. And it's been really a huge pleasure working with them on this since 2015. Just realised I should have mentioned that the online drink and draw posters a few slides back were done by Joe Stone, who again has been hugely supportive, and every couple of weeks provides a new poster for Gosh and BF to promote the event. So you'll be hearing from Joe in a bit, but again, another great sort of community activist for comics, another one of those people that without whom so many things wouldn't happen. So yes, I was remiss in not thanking Joe there. Okay, so the first half of this I wanted to talk about it. The second half, I'm not sure if this will work or not, but what we thought was maybe for the next 10 minutes, you'd like to grab a pen and some paper. This is an old prompt from an online drink and draw by Jenny Robbins, who many of you may well know. And the drawing theme for this is what birds are really thinking. And if you want to draw something and stick it up on social media with that hashtag #GoshTheFDD, and then I'll do some retweeting from there if you do. And you can stick it onto Instagram as well if you'd like to as well. And maybe if you're not feeling like it now, later during the day when there's a little bit of downtime this afternoon, feel free, and I will retweet stuff on Twitter. So yeah, if you'd like to do that, that might be a little bit of fun now. Does anybody have any questions about anything that I've spoken about there at all?
Andy, might it be a good idea to include an LDC hashtag as well?
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
What a lovely idea. And also, it might be, yes, we've got our time together in that break, Andy, so perhaps people can come together and draw during that time. That's very nice. Thank you, Jenny, for that great prompt.
I'll put this up onto Twitter as well after this bit, and if you look at the Broken Frontier Twitter after midday, it will be there for you to have a look at, and and go for it. Yeah, so if you've got any questions about that, or if you've got any questions about Broken Frontier, I'm happy to answer anything.
So you could put your questions in the chat, or you could just unmute yourself if you want to say something. Could also just be feedback, maybe not questions, but just any thoughts, responses.
How many of you actually have been to a drink and draw before, either online or in person? I'm just going to open up the chat so you can see it as well. Oh, what is the LDC hashtag?
Yeah, I was just thinking that. What is our LDC hashtag? Do we have a specific one? Anyone? Oh, Nicola's put something up. LDC 2021. What are birds really thinking? Any thoughts? Somebody.
Yes. That's nice. A nice comment. Yes, and I recognise the name as well.
Oh yeah. So Tammy says it's brightened up her whole year. The gosh. Broken Frontier drink and draw. Oh. Andy, what are your favourite drink and draw themes over the years?
I kind of like that make people think a bit out. I like the ones that are a little bit harder and make people think a little bit more about what they're going to do. I mean, it's incredible how sort of inventive. If you do check that hashtag on Twitter and have a look through it, because there's 2 years now almost worth of drawings on it, and just the inventiveness of the themes and how people come up with such clever takes on things in such a short amount of time. It's quite remarkable. Yeah, so I think I like. I really like the ones where people have stretched the imagination a little. It's nice to have a mix as well, because you don't want people too taxed every night, and it's nice to have more sort of accessible things as well. But I do like the ones that make people really think about what they've got to do.
I was curious, Andy, are there other drink and draws going on, like in Europe or the world or other cities in Britain?
It's a popular thing, I think, and I've seen other comics ones being advertised, but Yeah, I think we, like a lot of these things, we were lucky to do it when sort of things were maybe the idea of comic shop events were sort of coming into their own, and were with Steve Walsh particularly doing a lot of stuff at Gosh. And they all kind of complemented each other very nicely, and we really hit the crest of a wave there in building up an audience for it. Yeah, I do see other ones, and I know Off Life. I don't know if anybody remembers the comics anthology that was free a few years ago, and they drink and draw as well every month in person. But yeah, ours is free, so.
And if people wanted to set up a drink and draw of their own in their own city or country, that's something they could do.
Yeah, I think it's been a long there's been a tradition of doing them for a long time. So it wasn't an original idea. It was it was very much something that we were just grabbing the idea and going with it. Would you take drink and draw on the road?
Yeah.
That would be nice, actually, and I think, and again, we'll have to think post pandemic, or when we're in a better position, because there's no guarantees, of course, now 2 years later that we'll still have the same room in the same pub. So I would do more things as Nora has been doing. Yeah, as Nora has been doing with. What I'll do a bit late. Yeah, so what I'll do actually, I know this is being recorded, but I'll try and share the PowerPoint as well on social media later. I'll put the slides up individually too. And yeah, no worries about take all time you need today to stick stuff up. And what I'll do is I will retweet things. Sorry, just responding to things in the chat. Yeah, yes, brilliant. I hope I've got everything there.
Oh, is Twitter essential vehicle for sharing? I just deleted it.
No, stick it onto Instagram as well. That's always a worry because not every guest artist is on Twitter, and not everybody wants to be on Twitter anymore. So.
And you could also put it on if you happen to be on Facebook, although it's likely you've deleted that as well in that case. But we've got a LDC community Facebook group thing that you could also put it on. So.
Or if you want it to go onto the Broken Frontier one with your name, just email it to me. My email details are on the site, and they're here as well now.
Thanks, Andy. I think we must be coming to the end of our time. Yeah, we've got about 4 minutes. If anyone has a burning question for Andy in the last 4 minutes, or if there's anything else you want to say, Andy, before we wrap it up.
No, I guess just as you're all extremely creative types, don't forget if you do have anything that you want some extra eyes on, submissions, addresses on the website for Broken Frontier for reviews, and I'm quite happy to do that. And as well, if anybody has anything that they want to share in terms of events and things, I'm there, and a big backlog of emails at the moment. Hopefully now we are getting out of the post-thought bubble build-up. I shall finally get round to replying to people.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andy, for your sort of generosity, your kindness, your huge contribution to the comics community and to LDC Comics. We hugely appreciate it.
Welcome back, everybody. Hope you've all had a nice break. We are going to be, for our next section, we're going to be looking at the SelfMadeHero mentoring program that ran this year. And the aim of the program it's a 12-week free UK program run by SelfMadeHero and funded by Arts Council England, with an aim to encourage diversity in graphic novels. And I'm going to be welcoming Woodrow Phoenix, comics artist, designer, many things, and Charlotte Bailey, as we know, key LDC lady and also artist in her own right. So Woodrow was a mentor and Charlotte a mentee. So thank you both very much for coming. I tried a little bit of multi-pinning, so hopefully that worked. So welcome both of you. Thanks very much for being here. Great to see you. And Emma Haley, director of SelfMadeHero, sent us a short film clip. And so actually that's really good for covering a lot of questions that people might have. So we thought we'd watch that first and then over to questions and conversation between Charlotte and Woodrow. So let's see if my fantastic digital skills are up to sharing this.
Founded essentially because it does feel that the voices of artists of colour in the UK comics industry aren't as uplifted as they should be. We chose the theme Catalyst for the anthology because we felt that it would spark a conversation, which is essentially what Catalyst does. It sparks conversation, it sparks a reaction. Mentees and the mentors had to produce an 8-page comic. They were allowed to use what colours they wanted, making sure that it was kind of sequential art. So being able to communicate a story within 8 pages that didn't necessarily have to be rounded off really well, but would be able to stand alone in itself and also amongst the collection as well.
The title of my story is The Guessing Game, a challenge that I set myself to not restrain on relying on the facial features, but kind of involve more of the body part to unlock kind of like memories, because sometimes, you know, like body memories is quite like intuitive for the characters as well, so that's like kind of the idea behind it. There are masterclass where we dissect what works in a comic, and we take apart the components of how a comic artist make like conscious decision to make a comic work. For me to be part of this book is like a great achievement to me, and to be able to see my work, you know, sitting alongside people that I really admire, it means a lot to me.
What I gained from doing this program is experience of actually publishing a book, and I guess having my first step into the comic industry. Because I have autism, things in my head weren't exactly sounded, I guess, 100% correctly when written down. Having to plan a story and then figure out the panels of what needs to go where, what needs to be cut out, is there too much text? That was probably the most challenging part. It's a first for me to have my work in an anthology. It's the first time it's also my work's being published. It is pretty amazing for a first step, and at least it's something out of university that I've done. So I am at least proud of myself for doing it.
SelfMadeHero's graphic anthology program was all about recognizing and discovering new upcoming talent. Programs like this are so important because they play a huge part in rectifying and addressing and adjusting the balances, well, the imbalances that there are in publishing, in that, yes, diversity is increasing, but we still have a long way to go. And if there's any positive action, any physical positive action that we can do to encourage more people to step forward, to shout about it, to say, actually, do you know what? I am capable. I think I can do this. That will do a lot to sort of fix things, I think.
The title of my story is called The Camera. It's about a photographer became a target by a killer because he accidentally took a scene of murder. I got the inspiration from suspense novels. My favorite page is page 8 because the page 8 is the climax of the whole story, and there's a very intense conflict between the two characters in my stories, and I really enjoyed drawing that scene.
I'd say that I enjoy transformation of the mind and a bit of the soul, how that's represented in the body. So I resorted a lot to mixed media, sculpture, unconventional things. I like textures, like I used putty to create the texture, because when I hold putty, it feels soft, it feels malleable, and that's kind of how I wanted the characters to feel. I wanted them to feel soft and malleable, impressionable, because that's what they are to each other. and I wanted that to translate in a texture, and that was the only thing that I could find. I couldn't draw it. I had to actually bring that texture into the work. I don't really know where I would be or what I would be doing like mentally or emotionally if I didn't have that experience with the mentors and the other mentees. It just feels like it's kind of like pushed me into a direction that I really needed, especially after 2020, because it was such like an ambiguous time where I graduated into a pandemic with a design degree, and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. But then having that was just like kind of like cleared the fog and made it feel like I actually have a sense of direction again.
I am super grateful for the actual program, because not only it was the first time for me to actually, I mean, I wasn't technically a mentor, but I guess doing one masterclass kind of made me have a mentor. In those conversations that I had with them, I was amazed by their talent, their creativity, their enthusiasm, how receptive they were to feedback. And on top of everything, I actually learned a great deal from them.
So the name of the comic is Satyr in Clay, and it's about a shapeshifter that is deciding whether to settle down or whether to do something else, and she's questioning what she really wants in the world. My mentor was Woodrow Phoenix. He was very perceptive and helped a lot with the process of the actual making of the comic, which I think is you can only ever get on a one-to-one basis, really, when you've got your own problems, and then you can use someone's experience, lived experience as a creator. That was invaluable.
My mentor is Asia. Asia has been just incredible, truly, in many different ways. I can't speak her praise enough. We meet every week, sometimes twice a week. Sometimes, if I needed like extra help right before the deadline, I could just be like, Asia, please help me. And she would like usually have even some time or a lot of time to give me just to really think through and walk through my comic. Her approach was personally, the best thing I could ask for, because she was both very honest about the technical aspects, but that still gave me the space to think about what I want to say and how I want to say it. We analyzed a lot of comics. We talked about a lot of different just life subjects, and through this like shared conversation, both with her and with Chris, who is invaluable to my work, we ended up learning from each other and boosting my confidence, really, because I realized there's a lot of things I do know, and talking about myself and how I think through things was a very valuable thing. It's wonderful all around. For me, it was because I haven't had that comics community before. It was my foray into it, and now it's kind of like I'm making all these connections, and people are knowing me, and I'm knowing them, and it's becoming a bigger thing, I suppose, which is very exciting to me.
My story is called One Small Thing. I'd been wanting to do like a sort of horror story anyway for some time, and when I was thinking of Catalyst, I was just thinking of like, oh, how easily one small thing could happen in your life that could spark like a much bigger change, and that's where the idea sort of came from. So the story is about like these sort of supernatural entities, like they're sort of set apart from humanity. They go around and they cause these like tiny changes in people's lives that then trigger like a catastrophic event. It was really great to see the actual physical book. Like it looks so good, like the cover art, and then seeing everyone's stories I printed inside as well. Like not just my own, like seeing everybody's stories. It was really cool, and it just looks really good, and like everyone's just done such a great job bringing the book together and everything.
I learned probably as much as the mentees learned from this program. I gained so much. It's going to be very difficult to put that into words. I discovered I absolutely love working with people. I love mentoring. I didn't just work separately with my mentees, but we all worked together. We came together in joint group sessions where we read comics together, where we learned to analyze them, where we critiqued each other's work, where all of the work that was produced was something that was done collectively. So it was really a very enriching program. It was also fantastic for me to see and learn what their influences were. Their influences were entirely different to my own. And so for me, they opened my eyes to universes within comics that I didn't even know existed. And I realized then that if I was to guide them through, I needed to learn and know as much about their influences and what drives them forward or what inspires them as I can add to them. So it was a mutually, I think, enriching process, and for that I'm forever grateful.
I'm just trying to be a bit time conscious. Brilliant, really fabulous video, and it just makes you just feel so involved and enthusiastic about the programme. And you could also see how important it was emotionally as support throughout lockdown, I would have thought. I wondered if you could say a little bit about the process for choosing people for the programme, and that's open to either of you.
Okay, so the idea was, as the thing says, to give a platform to non-white creators to get involved in making comics, since the access for those people is limited, as we have all seen. So we, once the call went out, we had 62 responses. So it was just a case of going through all the people who had applied to be part of the programme, and first pass was just looking at their work, seeing, okay, do they have what it takes to do this? Do they understand kind of how comics work? Do they have any potential ideas that could be worked on and made better? Yeah, what's the potential? So from that, we made a short list of about 30, and we interviewed those 30 people. And from those 30, we arrived at our final 7, who we then worked with to make the book and the programme.
Fantastic. Well, I don't know if that was covered in the video, but what did people have to do to apply? Was it?
They had to send in about 12 pages worth of comics, whether that was, you know, separate stories or one long story. But enough so that we evaluate their storytelling abilities, because the idea was, of course, this is not a how-to draw program. This is a how-to-tell comics stories program. So some people sent in work that's beautiful, but it wasn't comics. You know, it was illustrations or it's photographs or something, and we couldn't use those because we said, well, you know, we need to know how your comics ability is, and we're not going to be able to teach you how to make comics in 12 weeks. We're going to teach you how to make better comics in 12 weeks. So that's the thing.
Yeah, so you can see that the bar was already high, which is, you know, you've got this amazingly professional anthology as well, which is...
Yeah. I mean, the idea was that, you know, if we thought that you had the potential that we could get you to publishable in 12 weeks, then yeah, we would go for it. So there were a couple of people who didn't really have much idea about what they're doing, but it was very clear that they certainly could do it if they just had the right teaching. So that was okay.
And Charlotte, how was it for you having Woodrow as your mentor?
No pressure.
Yeah. He was brilliant. Mainly because he asked the right questions. Like, some of them were really basic stuff, like, why have you called your character that name? And, you know, she had a different name at the start, and I had to like really think, like, why is she called that? And I chose Satyr because it's a sea monster and in ancient Greek, and she's a shapeshifter of, you know, questionable age. But you know, there's having that curiosity and to draw that out of me, like the story out of me in those sessions. That was very cool. And you also called me out on stuff as well. Like, have you been putting the time in? Have you actually been putting the time in? Because where have you been putting this time? Which is good because, you know, I kind of cheat myself a lot of time on my work. I do. I tend to prioritize other things and other commissions and other people. So the fact that he kind of caught that, caught my tail kind of thing. It's like, you need to put in the time. If you know, that was really helpful. So letting me get away with things, I think, was really good. And paying that attention and that amount of care, asking the good questions in a really non-judgmental way. Like, you didn't really lead me to anything. Usually you just kind of questioned me into my own answers, which is a really cool way to go about it. And sometimes your questions, like, it allowed me to put, I'd made a decision, you were questioning it, but it like, no, that's the right decision. Okay, cool, that's a good decision. Go with that. So yeah, that was how it was working with Woodrow. It's accepted.
Must have been quite intense. I didn't actually realise it was over 12 weeks, so that must have been quite focused. You're working full time as well to know you're going to produce all this work in that time.
Well, we had a kind of system of masterclasses where each week one of the mentors would present some aspect of comics storytelling. 1 week it was speech balloons and captions and how lettering works. 1 week it was color. 1 week it was character design. 1 week it was story structure, that kind of thing. So there were kind of little exercises for everyone to do, just to help them to make sure that they understood every aspect of how comics works. Because as we all know, it's very technical, although you don't really think about it that way because a lot of the techniques are invisible. But there's a lot of stuff you have to learn that's just purely how you structure something to make the best use of both your image making abilities and your story making abilities. And so a lot of it is just technical things, really. Once you've learned those things, then your ability to make a story is just improved because you don't think about that stuff so much. So, I mean, a lot of my mentoring with Charlotte was just about asking those kind of questions. I mean, generally it's that thing of once you've figured out why you're doing something and what it's for, then you're more able to make it, whatever it needs to be. So you just have to keep asking yourself, why is this here? What's this for? Why am I doing this? What does this mean? Where's that going? And often people don't ask themselves those questions until they're too far in to do anything about it. But if you keep asking yourself those questions at the beginning, then it's much easier to make it the shape you want it to be.
That's nice and succinct, actually, because it's not about the appearance, it's actually about the heart of what you're doing and why, isn't it? Can you see, Charlotte, how your work has changed in that really short period? Are you able to look back and go, yeah, that is different?
Oh yeah, on a technical level, because I was experimenting in ways I hadn't done before, with both nib and brush together, which is an obvious thing, but for some reason I hadn't tried it. So it's changed on a technical level. Settings and backgrounds being part of the character. That's hate settings and backgrounds. I've been avoiding it because of the complexity and time it takes. But Woodrow's right. The team's right.
Well, again, it's just that thing of there are no arbitrary elements in a book.
Yeah.
Everything counts. It's all every line means something, and there isn't really such a thing as a background and a foreground. It's just the picture and the information that needs to be in that picture, and some of it will be your character and some of it will be the other elements, and they're all important. And I know people tend to think of the background as just something you have to put in. It's kind of tedious, but no, that's actually part of your story. And if you're not putting those things in because you don't want to draw them, then actually you're not making the best use of your time and your story, and you're cheating the reader of things that they could be useful.
Yeah, and also a big one for me was what Woodrow just said about why you're doing it and what you're here for. I realized that what I love most about what I'm reading is like you learn something from it. Like when I learn something from what I'm reading, that's when I really get a kick. That's when I really love or something stays with me. So then I centered my story, changed a little bit. I centered it around a little piece of knowledge that struck me and that resonated and moved my heart. And then the whole story came together as soon as I realized that. As soon as I saw that thing, it really unlocked everything else. So that's how my work's changed.
Could you say what that bit of knowledge was? Because I really like that point of what are you teaching? What's the reader gaining that helps them grow in what you've produced?
Yeah, for me it was just the new bit of knowledge. It was a really arbitrary bit of knowledge, but it was about how cowrie shells were used during the slave trade as currency, and then that became the catalyst. Really, that became the catalyst for this character. Questioning where she comes from because she holds the cowrie shell in her possession and is curious, like what's going on here. But that bit of knowledge, I wanted people to be curious about that, and it's in the book, and it's connected to a bunch of other things that were going on there. So that was the bit of knowledge. and going forward, you asked me like, how would my work change? I have that awareness in myself now that that's what I'm attracted to, and that's what I can weave the story around is what did I find surprising, at this point in my life, that other people could probably, learn.
And what will you do next now the program is finished? Does this story get developed into a larger book, or will you do something else?
Yeah, it can become a larger book, and I've got so many ideas, yo. Like that's my problem. Like Woodrow, like put his finger on it. It's like you lack focus, and I was like, yes, I do. Yes, I do. So you asked, and I saw this question come in, and I was trying to think. Okay, so what do I announce? Which do I commit myself to, like publicly, kind of thing. But
But you do have some talents in different directions, actually, don't
and
you?
I have yeah, man. I make films as well. I'm hosting conversations. But that particular story, yes, it's part of a larger story in a sci-fi fantasy world that I've been developing for a couple of years. And she's a character in part of that world. Yeah, short story, short answer.
Jenny Robbins has just put, the best artists always more ideas than time.
Wow.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
And Woodrow, what have you gained from the programme, do you think?
What did I gain? So many things. But just the kind of joy and delight of being able to pass on this information and to see how it works and to understand other people's processes and to get new views on things, all that kind of stuff. It's really just that desire to make sure that people can realize their potential, really, which kind of sounds kind of corny, but actually there's nothing better than being able to show people things and then being able to absorb them, and suddenly you can see how they've changed and they've got this thing and they understand it now. And I kind of feel like it's my responsibility to pass that on. It's like evangelical. I must now teach the youth.
Oh, good. Someone's asked actually about whether the mentoring program is going to run next year.
Yeah, it's not going to run next year because it's funded. The way these funding things work is you can't submit the same thing again and again. But it is we're gonna try and get funding for it in 2023 in a slightly different form. Yeah.
2023 is a good year for comics, for the sounds of it. Got the LDC award.
Yeah. So I mean, sorry, are you saying so? Sorry, Charlotte. Do you saying?
No.
Oh, okay. No, I was just going to say. So as the funding, the Bañados Council funding, which is brilliant, but also always wants something to be different. It's like, okay, it's not broken, it's working. Why not repeat it? No, you've got to change it. So have either of you got any thoughts about how it could be improved, evolved, changed in any way?
Well, it kind of worked pretty well. Well, I'm saying that. Obviously, Charlotte can say what she thinks about it. The way that we devised it, I mean, we were doing it for the first time, so there were some things that we could have tweaked a little bit just in terms of how the mentors worked together as a group, the way that we made ourselves available to our mentees at any time, and the kind of feedback that we got from them and how we worked on that. So, but those are kind of minor tweaks. But as a general program, I think it worked really, really well.
Yeah.
What do you think, Charlotte?
Yeah, as a content, the knowledge part, the practice part, the connecting to each other, the one-to-one help is all brilliant. I wouldn't change any of that. Just time, I think. And like you said, it was working full time at the time.
Do you think if it was longer? Do you think if it was a longer program that would have lacked energy? Or
yeah, maybe 2 weeks between bits as well. Obviously we couldn't have met in person, that wasn't possible, and there were a lot of benefits to it being online, but that would have been that would have been a bonus.
You mean like so have a month teaching, mentoring, and then 2 weeks resting, not necessarily just working, letting your ideas marinate? But
saying that, there is something to be said for having a deadline every week and being forced to sit down and get your ideas down and having that that regiment,
Mm.
ritual,
Yeah, I mean, I think
discipline.
in my experience, if you give someone a long time to do something, then they take a long time to do it. You know, it's as simple as that. It's like you have to have deadlines because otherwise things just don't happen, because you put things off because you're busy and you have a life and you have things to do and you've got a job and you want to watch TV and you want to hang out with your friends and you want to have dinner with, you know, all those things. And if you actually have a deadline, you've got to do it. You know, it's as simple as that, really.
Would it have been different if you'd been some opportunities to meet up? This probably should be the last question. To meet up in real life, do you think that would have made things very different? Did you sometimes get frustrated that you couldn't reach through the screen and physically
Angle people?
Yeah. Oh, why not working?
Yeah, would it have made much of a difference to meet in person? Would it have made much difference? I think just on a you know, when you meet in person. So when we did meet in person, we met in Kendal, and I guess the organic conversations that we had, like Pris's process, like the process of the other people in the, it was incredible. I learned so much just by osmosis, just being there next to their conversations about stuff that wasn't taught, that we wouldn't have talked about over Zoom really, because they were just kind of happening, and we were pulling out each other's portfolios and but you couldn't really do on Zoom. You can't just show, you know, your digital stuff, but they were pulling out their sketches. So I learned a lot in those few in-person interactions in Kendal. So yeah, I think big time. It makes a big difference. Meeting in person in sort of intangible ways as well, on an emotional level. You know, we've connected immediately. It was like we'd known each other for years, and we hadn't. It was our first meeting. And you need that, you know, it's a very solo, lonely journey in it, your comic. You're in your head a lot of the time. So, you know, even just connecting on a human, like doing that heart work of someone. So yeah, definitely, actually, yeah. The time thing is up for debate, but definitely in person helps.
I suppose being like being at college, when you look back, and a lot of your change and development comes from the people you mix with and those casual conversations or what they're reading, and I'm going to read that and all that, isn't there?
That too, yeah.
Yeah, it's like working in a studio. It's like, you know, I shared my space with 2 other artists for a long time, and that was just great because you have all this stuff that happens just by being around other people and seeing what they do. They see what you do. People make suggestions casually that turn out to be really important. You know, when you try and think things through, you can say something that you can't figure out, and they can figure out in a second, and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Hello, fabulous. Thank you so much. I've been loving this morning so far. So I'm very excited to introduce Joe Stone up next. Joe Stone, as Andy was saying earlier on, is a big mover and shaker in the world of comics, does loads of stuff for this community. He's a graphic designer, writer, artist, and comic creator. He also runs the group WHIP, which is a work in progress group for aspiring comic artists. I'm assuming it stands for work in progress, but Joe, you can put me straight if not. And also he has created the Hackney Zine and Comic Fair that I had a table at once, and it was a really, really brilliant event. There was something quite magical about it. It was one of the most smoothest comic fairs that I've been to. So I'm really excited to bring Joe on to kind of tell us how he is so good at all this stuff.
Thanks. So yeah, thank you so much, Wallis, for the introduction. Yeah, I'm Jay, as Wallis just correctly said. I make comics. I run the webcomics group, which does indeed stand for Work in Progress Comics, which is a meetup group where different artists, all different experience levels, we all get together, basically just bounce around ideas, give each other feedback, talk through things. And yeah, I am the founder and organizer of the Hackney Comic and Zine Fair. And Nora's here as well. And Nora, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, a lot of you might have met me when I worked at Gosh Comics for several years, and I helped Andy organize the drink and draw, and also I do some other things with Broken Frontier. And also I have worked for several small comic publishers in London throughout the last couple of years. Currently I work in VFX, so sort of semi-art related. But yeah, that's me.
Excellent. So, everyone can see my screen now, hopefully. You can see the greenness. Good. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about what the Hackney Comic and Zine Fair is, what it was, what it is now, and various things. So yeah, as what I said as well, we had an event back in 2019. So this was the first comic event I'd ever organized. I'm glad to hear it went so smoothly. Thank you very much. It was just like I said, the first one I've done. I was trying to kind of keep it purposefully quite small, just because of my lack of experience in terms of the amount of like time it took, the amount of people who were involved in it. So it was just one day event, 2 halls, 42 exhibitors, and we had about 400 attendees over the course of the day, which for me was really, really good. I felt like that was kind of surpassed my expectations in terms of the amount of people who are going to be showing up to it. And here are a few nice pictures. In fact, here is a picture of Wallis, I believe, out behind your table. The various halls. And we had a courtyard. The weather was nice. Everyone drank lots of beer. It was all just kind of a nice little event. The thing I was like probably the most proud, I think the biggest success about it was that the audience who came weren't necessarily the same kind of regular audience who are going to other comic events in London. As much as obviously we love the people who come to all the regular comic events in London, I was really, really keen to try to just expand it in terms of the way that I kind of pulled together the marketing, the venue, just the event in general, the kind of vibe. I was trying to make it not feel like kind of a standard comic event. Just knowing that can be like maybe a turn of people who aren't so familiar with the scene, aren't so familiar with the medium, if they're a little bit kind of just unsure about what to expect. So I was really kind of trying to make it something that appealed to a bit of a wider audience, just to try to cast net wider, bring more people into our comics community. I think on that front, it was quite a success. I think a lot of people who came along, it was their first time ever coming to a kind of a comic event or a comic fair of any kind. So yeah, it was good. I was very happy with the way it all went. So happy, in fact, that I got in touch with the venue to book it again for the following year, for 2020. And that year, then nothing happened at all, because obviously pandemic hit, everyone was very sad, got inside their houses. It was one of those things where it was meant to be in September, and it was that kind of touch and go thing of, at the start of the pandemic in March, everyone was like, this will be finished by the summer, we'll be fine, we'll definitely be able to go ahead with it. So I still kind of had in the back of my mind planning it as a physical in-person event. And as it got closer and closer to the time and the realization, obviously, the pandemic and COVID wasn't getting any better, then I realized it probably wasn't going to be a thing that was actually going to be able to go ahead. And at that point as well, it was kind of too late to make any alternative plans in terms of try to move things online or to try to do a kind of alternative event for it. It was just not quite enough time to organize in terms of the exhibitors, in terms of just the infrastructure behind those kind of things. So I decided just to park it entirely into 2020 and move things to 2021. And yeah, 2021, I decided, even it was still without knowing what the pandemic was, how that was going to go, to err on the side of caution, to actually try to move more or less the entire thing online. So that's what happened this year. This was the Hackney Comic 2020, Hackney Comic and Zine Fair 2021. So yeah, we decided to try to bring it online rather than have it as an in-person thing, just for obviously the safety of everyone, even if things were opening up a little bit in September. When we first kind of started planning this at the start of the year, I was still really keen to make sure that it felt safe and accessible. Didn't want to put the pressure on any of the exhibitors, didn't want to put the pressure on anyone to have to like travel into London if they weren't comfortable with it. And also just never knowing what the next thing was going to be, whether venues going to be shut down, whether things weren't going to be allowed to happen, to like commit the financial and just obviously the planning structure into kind of having an in-person event. So I decided to make it an online digital comic fair. And in general, like I say, the previous one was like a one-day fair, 42 exhibitors, fairly kind of low key. It was a really good day. I was really happy with how it went. But this one, I kind of thought, maybe went a little bit more ambitious with it. So rather than a one-day fair with 40 exhibitors, it became a 1 month long event with an online digital fair, 90 exhibitors, 2 online workshops, 6 online panel talks, 2 in-person exhibitions, and 4 in-person events. So it was kind of a big jump up from the previous year. And this sort of like spiraled maybe a little bit out of control, possibly in terms of just the kind of level of ambition. part of it was kind of based around the fact that it was going to be online, the fact that we didn't have a physical venue. We actually weren't looking at like the benefits of being online. We didn't have to have it just for a single day. We could have it go on as long as we wanted to, because we didn't have to pay like deposits and holding fees, things like that. And the fact that we obviously could have more exhibitors because there was no kind of limit to the amount of people we could fit onto a website. I made a limit just in terms of the amount of people I thought was feasible to be able to manage and to be able to like talk about and share their work. And just for any of the audience members who wanted to kind of check it out, not having so many that it was kind of overwhelming. So kind of trying to keep it a manageable number. And then we also realized that, having talks, obviously so many events have been happening over Zoom, like this very one here. So many things over the last year, I mean, people have kind of got accustomed to that. And so actually being able to have the opportunity to have talks throughout the month. And it just kind of ended up spiraling. Nora as well,
I might have spiraled it a little bit.
Very good at suggesting really good ideas that it just kind of ended up being like, oh, and also we could do this thing, and why not this thing? And the in-person events especially, which is what Nora was like really helping about. We'll talk about that a little bit in a second. But that was another thing, is obviously the Hackney Comic and Zine Fair. And if we're doing it entirely online, then there was nothing to do with Hackney. So I was personally really keen to try to ground something in like the local area. I thought it was kind of important to keep that continuity from the previous year, and also just it's the place where I lived. I actually moved out of Hackney now, but only just down the road. And so it was kind of really important to me. I think like the community, I think like with the previous event, then trying to draw that audience who wasn't necessarily your stereotypical comic going audience. I was really keen to kind of make sure there was still some kind of grounding in the local area, and to try to kind of bring people in. So we did have a few in-person events, which we'll talk about in a sec. And just to give you a brief overview of how it all worked. So the digital fair itself was almost on our website. We had 3 halls, which does different pages on the website, where essentially there was just a grid of 30 exhibitors per hall, all of which just had linked directly through to their website. So we didn't take any cuts or anything of the money. We didn't kind of put any infrastructure. It was more just a portal to be able to find different artists and try to present them in like the best light we possibly could. We had a series of talks, including people like Gareth Brooks, Jules Sheila, Hannah Berry, a bunch of different talks, all of which were really good, all of which were held on Zoom, about all sorts of different subject matter. And if you missed any of these talks, actually, most of them are up on our YouTube page, so you can actually still go back and watch them if you missed the event in the first place. I'll put a link to that in the chat in a second if you want to check it out. They were also one of these things where we didn't quite know exactly what to expect in terms of the amount of people who are going to be signing up to it. And the amount of people who actually did end up coming to talks was like, again, it actually exceeded our expectations of quite how many people were going to be coming along. We also had some workshops, another thing that we would have loved to have done in person, but just because of the amount of space we had in the venue back in 2019, there was just no way we could really fit it in. So again, the benefits of moving it online rather than doing it in person meant we did have the space to do this. And so we had to work workshops about doing zines, making zines, making comics with experts in that field, which were really, really fun. I also went along and got to take part in both of the workshops. They were really enjoyable. I made a comic and I made a zine, and it was just a good time. And I think it was really good to be able to kind of have that level of interaction. Obviously, the big thing that we kind of missed from it being online versus being in person was the actual interaction with the audience. When it says people going to a website, looking at people's online shops, that kind of, I think the biggest thing that was lacking was when you have an in-person comic fair, being able to actually talk to the people who are coming through the door, find out how they found out about it, find out who they are, and kind of get a gauge level of interest. So being able to have these workshops where it was like a very interactive thing, where people got to kind of take part and they got to show their work at the end was really satisfying. And then we also had a series of in-person events. And this is where I'll hand over to the lovely Nora to talk about these.
Thank you. Well, you haven't mentioned, Joe, so one of the big things with the fair as well is that it was funded by the Arts Council, as well as Hackney Council and the Hackney Cooperative Development. So a part of, what we said to them in the mandate is that, it's very community driven. We're bringing business to local businesses that would have suffered through COVID. So a lot of these events were collaborations with those local businesses, as well as highlighting the Hackney community and giving them an opportunity to interact with comic artists in a way they might not have before. And because we had this exhibition in Gillette Square, which I'll talk about in a second, all these events were in that area. so that we were, you know, really collaborating with that community, and we weren't kind of just putting ourselves in there and not giving something to them and, you know, talking to them about what they want. So Hackney Council was able to give us funding to be able to pay artists for these events, as well as the co-op, which manages the square, gave us funding as well to be able to run these events. So all the events were in local businesses where the exhibition was. So it was just sort of like drawing the audience to the area. And, you know, like Joe said earlier, that we wanted to really give a range of different types of events depending on what people's circumstances were, and how comfortable they were in whether or not they wanted to be outside, inside, just online. So, and I think we managed to get that, as well as that we, you know, we got artists who had never been able to have that opportunity to be a part of the London comics community in the way that it existed before COVID. And then the exhibition, Joe. So the exhibition Inkwell was actually an idea I had in the midst of lockdown, based around just, you know, art is such a great mode of therapy, I think, especially when we were all very anxious and stressed. So to have a way to have comics art in the public in a COVID safe way. And originally I had wanted to do it in a park near me, but there's some logistical issues with my local council. So when Joe and I were talking about having kind of a there, we thought, why don't we merge two ideas? And the exhibition was of 13 artists that were all anonymously nominated from, there's a sort of a group of us who communicate quite regularly. Some of them are in this chat, who had met in Drink and Draw. So everyone was asked to anonymously nominate a person that they felt represented the future of London comics. So it wasn't just like me and who I think are great artists. So it's a real representation of sort of the community in London and, you know, people's different tastes. And the sort of what I asked of all the artists is their prompt was sort of mental health and well-being, the idea of, you know, being an isolated artist in COVID and thinking about the tools that they use to kind of get through that. And then because it was exquisite corpse style, each artist saw the previous piece, but nothing more. So they were kind of like riffing off of each other's art. So it was also an opportunity for them to collaborate with other artists in a COVID safe way, which, you know, we missed out on doing by not, again, doing those in-person events all the time. And you can see that's the beginning of it. So no art yet. So it was on the hoardings. There was some construction of a new building that's going on there. And because Hackney Council, I think they're still doing it as like a way to kind of make things look a bit better. They had a program where they were giving funding to kind of have art around construction sites. So we were able to get some funding to be able to kind of print these posters and put them up over where they're doing this work. So you can kind of read the comic as you're like walking around this construction site, which actually in talking to the locals, you know, they just really enjoyed because it, you know, making this community's area like a focal point for art and, you know, something beautiful and that they can engage with. We had such a really amazing positive response from that. Some more, Joe?
Yeah.
All right, Joe has control over the PowerPoint.
I'm in charge.
So you can see some of the artists with their art, you know, and you have some artists who are at the beginning of their careers who had never had commissions before. So it was really a great opportunity as well, reinvest within the arts community, which again was also part of our sort of funding application, that we're investing not only in the Hackney community, but the arts community as well, which obviously does not have necessarily the financing that it would normally have or job opportunities. So to be able to, you know, help kind of kickstart someone's career or people who might have been quite active but hadn't been for that moment was really important.
Yeah, completely. I think the work itself obviously was so good. The fact that it kind of led into each other, it was so inspiring to kind of see that the way the artists were inspired by each other to kind of just like to follow on. Some of them were like much more obvious kind of jumps. Some of them are much more subtle, kind of just taking themes. So it was this really like interesting in terms of the way it did kind of form an actual sort of narrative as you walked around the square. Was super exciting, really, really smart, really, really fun. Just for the audience and also for the artist, I think, to be able to pull together. So yeah, that was
also one of the other big aspects, because it was about mental health, is that on each of the piece they were randomly assigned a different local charity or organization that looks after mental health, sort of, within the range of abuse, homelessness, education, unemployment. So when you were looking at the piece of art, you also see, like, I see Spitalfields Trust on one of them, then there's Accumulate, which is a homeless charity. So people in the area, because you have a quite impoverished community around there, could see these free organizations that they can access if they so need. So just trying to put as much free information sort of in front of you as easily accessible as possible. And as well, we made a little booklet that I handed out to local businesses that they could give free to people with, the art, which we hope is, could be used as a therapy to some, as well as this free information.
Absolutely. And that wasn't the only exhibition we had. We also had one from
Second
Jenny
one,
Robbins,
and I think
is in
the
this
artist
chat.
is lurking somewhere.
Yeah.
So Jenny Robbins, which I hope quite a lot of you will know from LDC Comics, which is quite a cornerstone of the community. This is more of a spontaneous collaboration, and I think this is a good representation of kind of taking random opportunities and kind of just running with it. Joe very kindly had introduced us to, a friend of his had introduced us to the owner of the Ridley Road Social Club, which is a really cool venue if no one's been before, because they have artist studios there, as well as they do gigs, they have a restaurant, they have a record shop. So it's very focused on supporting the local arts community. So they were able to give us over the space, and they said, do what you want with it. So we did. And, because Jenny is very important to us as our own group of friends, as an artist, a comic creator, and to see the work that she's done in the last couple of years, and as well as her book Biscuits, if you haven't read, is a great look into the lives of women in London and so many different amazing stories. So I sat in Jenny's apartment and we sort of curated this exhibition together. Unfortunately, Jenny wasn't able to attend because the 2 days before we were meant to install the exhibition, I was sitting outside of her apartment because she tested positive for COVID. So we managed to do a Zoom call interview sort of with her for the opening of the exhibition. You can see it there, as well as we made a life-size biscuit cutout. I don't think we have a picture of it on here.
No,
and we all we took pictures of ourselves in front of the biscuits, like you see in the book. And then Jenny did this great sort of this large-scale piece of all of us who had taken photos, which was really cool.
Yeah, I think yeah, this was just a really good example of kind of the hybrid nature of the entire event in general, of trying to do this thing that was a kind of online event with physical aspects. And thank you so much to Jenny as well for being so flexible and accommodating. This was all from like the kind of launch night. She was meant to be doing like a talk on stage, interviewed live on stage, and obviously this, like, at the very last minute on like the night before, obviously everything had to change, but we managed to adapt on the fly, as so many things like have to do in this day and age, to be able to project her onto the wall and be able to kind of have still have the interview take part. Which again, you can actually see the interview that's shared on our YouTube page, which I'll post a link to the chat in just a second, if you want to hear Jenny talk about her book and about not being at her own launch event. But it was, I thought the event was great fun. I had a really good time at the launch event. I'm sorry, Jenny, that you couldn't be there, but it was a very good, the space is great, the work was great, the talk was great, even though it kind of had to end up changing a little bit at the last minute. But yeah, like I said, that kind of does exemplify this sort of, the way we sort of had to continuously adapt throughout the entire scope of the whole event, from moving the fair itself online. And I think there was still like maybe a little bit of confusion when we were handing out the flyers and posters to like local businesses, that a lot of them are saying like, so where's the comic fair? Like, no, that's on the internet, but there's other things happening here and there's all events going on all over the place. And yeah, I think it was maybe like a little confusing to some people, but hopefully it generally worked out. I do actually have some stats from the end of it. So all the in-person events, all the drinker draws and other things we did were completely fully booked. 50 people attended all the workshops. We had 300 people overall, I think, thereabouts attend our various online talks. That's not how you spell attendees. I'm so sorry, this is being recorded, how embarrassing. And we had 3,000 unique different visitors on the website, which I was really happy about, and 10,000 overall website views over the course of the entire month. So just in terms of the amount of people who kept on coming back again and again as well, to hopefully look at the different halls, check out different exhibitors, realized that they'd forgotten to buy something and wanted to come back and buy it again. So that was, yeah, it was one of those things of it's so kind of hard to gauge. Another big difference, obviously, between an in-person event versus an online event is that when you're in person, you can see everyone coming through the door, you can see them interacting with the audience, with the exhibitors. You kind of get a real sense of how well it's going when you're there, and if it's quiet, then you're like, oh, this is bad. But yeah, when it's online, it was so hard to kind of know these things, and I was trying really hard to not like watch the website stats every single day and just try to allow things to kind of happen naturally. So when I kind of checked it overall at the end, I was very happy with the numbers we managed to get in terms of people coming through the virtual doors. And yeah, like the events in person, the amount of people who came to the drink and draw events and the other in-person gatherings. We had a chalk drawing thing, which Noah talked about a little bit. I think was really well attended as well. It was a really good way to just get a bunch of people in the local community involved in kind of making comics essentially on the floor in the square where the exhibition was being held, and just kind of really try to embrace the kind of community in that sense. That was good. And yeah,
they were all sold out, so people were desperate to have a little bit of in-person interaction, I think.
I think yeah, a lot of it was that, yeah, obviously after so much kind of online stuff, having events and the amount of people we could have at the events just to be in compliance with all the with all the COVID rules, making sure that we weren't allowing more in them was safe and comfortable for people. So we obviously like the kind of were limited in that respect a little bit, but the fact that they all sold out anyway was still excellent and very exciting. And that is the end of the presentation. Thank you so much. I'll stop sharing my screen and get that big green thing out of your faces.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely incredible. I am in awe of how much you have pulled together and served and delivered and know what you've done for so many people. Definitely answered all of the questions that I had, but I did want to pick up on one of them, which was, who does it serve? Obviously, it serves many creators, community alike. And I was just wondering if you have any kind of moments where you kind of got the feedback, got a rewarding moment where you thought, this has all been worth it. Like any kind of little anecdotes or stories where it's time to kind of blow your own trumpet now.
I mean, I think like me and Nora probably have slightly different ones. I think like one of the things that was really satisfying for me was with the Inkwell exhibition, and actually like seeing like the local people in the square who basically weren't like familiar with comics really, and us putting up the art there, and as Nora mentioned, like they were really pleased because I think like on the hoardings before there were big things saying like don't do crime and just kind of warnings to the local community just in general. Which obviously isn't particularly friendly for the people who like the businesses who worked there. It kind of wasn't necessarily attracting people to come into the space. Definitely, it was definitely kind of making the kind of space feel like a sort of negative, reinforcing like maybe negative ideas people have about that particular area of London, like Dalston of Hackney. So the fact that we got to like put up this art and actually having a bunch of the locals who they didn't know anything about comics, looking at it, walking around, and just like enjoying it, coming up to us and telling us how much they liked it and how impressed they were by it. That was a really, really satisfying thing for me, definitely. And yeah, I think like I say, like checking the actual overall stats at the end and seeing the amount of people who still managed to take part in the website, because it was that thing of it was behind the scenes. I was very stressed out for the entire month of September, just like sitting there, just like I have no idea what's going on. Is this going well? I don't really know how people are reacting to this, because there was a social media chatter and things like that, and people saying this is really good, I enjoyed that talk, etc.
You put up the window painting either from Shazleen.
Oh yeah, we also did some window painting.
Oh yeah, cool. That's true. Yeah, we did at the jazz club that's in Gillette Square. We did window painting with Shazleen Khan, which was amazing.
That was very good.
And yeah, and it was also, it's a business that hasn't been able to afford to kind of like revamp themselves after COVID and struggling. So for us to come in, like clean up their windows, put some nice art up to help attract some positive attention was really an amazing experience, and get to spend the day kind of working in that space as well.
Amazing. We had one question from Joshua who said he guesses not, but are the comics that decorate the construction site still there?
It's possible they might be,
Yeah.
to be honest. They might just not have taken them down because I think the hoardings, the construction site was meant to be finished in October. So basically,
Yeah.
we put them up right at the start of September. They were meant to be there for the whole month because then the hoardings were all going to come down and the thing was going to be finished. And as with most construction jobs, it wasn't. So they were definitely up for like a month or so afterwards. They might. I've not actually been back to the square for a little while, but they might still be there now. But there are some additional photos
They're
actually
on the website, right, Joe?
on our website. Yeah, I shall put a link to the website here in the chat, so people can check out that. There's definitely like a few photos of it. If you go to the exhibition page, and also, like I say, I'll put a link to the YouTube channel where if anyone missed out on any of the talks and they want to come along and watch them, they can.